My brother fired me as CEO, not knowing I owned the docks his entire fleet needs to survive. And now, he is begging me to come back. All right, Reddit, strap in. This one's a doozy. Happened over the past year and just wrapped up. My brother fired me the day he became CEO of our family's shipping company. We'll call it Tideway Transport because I'm not in the mood for lawsuits. You don't understand modern logistics, big brother, he said. I just smiled and walked out, knowing well he was about to get screwed. Here's what went down. Picture this. I, 42 male, have been running operations at Tideway Transport for 17 freaking years. This place is in Port Townsend, Washington, and we move cargo up and down the Pacific coast. Our operation handles everything from containerized freight to bulk cargo, lumber heading to Japan, electronics coming back from South Korea, agricultural products moving between California and Alaska. We process about 2,000 containers per month during peak season, with our biggest client being a tech company that ships $40 million worth of components annually. Small enough that everyone knows everyone, big enough that screwing up means real consequences. My brother Kyle, 38 male, just got voted in as CEO 3 weeks prior. Dad stepped back for health reasons, which really meant he was tired of the stress and wanted to go fishing more. Kyle had been VP of Strategic Development, which basically meant he made PowerPoint presentations while I actually ran the day-to-day operations. I'll give him one thing. He knew how to schmooze. The guy had charm when he wanted to. Landed us a contract with a boutique electronics importer last year, purely because he talked golf with their CFO. The contract wasn't huge, but it made him look like a genius to the board. Dude walks into my office wearing this ridiculous tailored blazer that probably cost more than most of our dock workers make in a month. Hair slicked back like he's auditioning for Wall Street 3. Behind him was some assistant I didn't recognize, probably hired from one of those temp agencies that specialize in corporate restructuring. Kid looked nervous as hell, clutching a tablet like it was a life preserver. Turns out this was Brett something or other, fresh out of some MBA program, armed with nothing but theoretical knowledge and zero practical experience. The kind of guy who'd never touched a cargo manifest, but could tell you all about supply chain optimization metrics. Chase, we need to talk, he says, hands in pockets. I'm thinking maybe he wants to discuss the new safety protocols I'd been working on, or the contract renewal with Seattle Port Authority. We'd been negotiating a 5-year extension that would secure our largest client relationship, or maybe the crane maintenance schedule. We had some equipment issues that needed addressing before they became expensive problems. Nope. I'm making some changes. The board supports it. You don't understand modern logistics. I laughed. This guy was telling me I don't understand logistics? I've been negotiating dock leases since he was doing beer bongs in his USC dorm room. I've handled port disputes that would have sunk us, managed crews through 3 different labor strikes, and somehow kept us profitable while bigger companies went under. Hell, I was the one who figured out how to optimize our container stacking system to increase capacity by 15% without expanding our footprint. The optimization system involved completely rethinking how we position different container types based on weight distribution, pickup schedules, and crane access patterns. Heavy containers on the bottom, time-sensitive shipments near the gate, refrigerated units close to power connections. Sounds simple, but it took 2 years of trial and error to perfect, and it saved us about $340,000 annually in handling costs. You're firing me? I asked, just to make sure I heard this clown correctly. I'm bringing in fresh thinking, leaner, faster operations. Gavin Murray from Access Line is coming aboard as COO. Brett was practically vibrating with nervous energy behind Kyle, probably realizing he'd just witnessed a corporate execution. Kid looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor tiles. Gavin freaking Murray, consultant turned COO. This guy's resume was like a greatest hits album of corporate disasters. He'd streamlined 3 companies into bankruptcy and walked away richer each time. His last gig was with Pacific Marine Solutions, where he implemented an efficiency protocol that resulted in 2 major accidents and a $3.2 million OSHA fine. Word around the industry was that he'd collect his 6-figure consulting fee, then vanish before the lawsuits started flying. The accidents weren't minor either. First one involved a crane operator who'd been forced to work double shifts due to Murray's staffing cuts. Guy fell asleep at the controls and dropped a 40-foot container into the hull of a cargo ship. Second incident was a dock worker who got crushed when safety protocols were bypassed to meet Murray's new, aggressive throughput targets. Both times, Murray blamed operator error instead of acknowledging that his cost-cutting had created dangerous working conditions. I could see the writing on the wall. Gavin's playbook was always the same. Cut crew sizes, defer maintenance, squeeze suppliers until they deliver substandard parts, then act shocked when everything falls apart. I grabbed the only thing I wanted from that office, an old black and white photo of our grandfather standing next to the original crane at our first dock. Grandpa built this whole thing from nothing back in the 60s, with 2 trucks and a handshake deal for dock space. You have no idea what you just did, I told Kyle on my way out. Don't make this harder than it has to be, he replied. Funny thing is, 5 years back when we were tight on cash, I started putting some of my own money into long-term fallback options. Quietly. A few investments that'd give me leverage if things ever went sideways. Let's just say I wasn't spending my end-of-year bonuses on new trucks or office espresso machines. The assistant followed me out like he was escorting a security risk. Walking to my car, I looked back at the terminal across the water. Those gray cranes standing like giant metal dinosaurs against the bay. Kyle could play CEO all he wanted, bring in his fancy consultants and restructure whatever made him feel important. But here's the thing he forgot. I owned the ground those cranes were standing on. Next morning, I'm sitting on my porch with coffee, watching freighters crawl across the sound like lazy whales. First time in 17 years I hadn't opened my laptop by 6:30 a.m. Felt weird as hell. The silence was kind of unsettling. No emergency calls about delayed shipments, no weather alerts affecting our scheduled arrivals, no crew scheduling headaches. For nearly 2 decades, my phone had been my leash to that place. Now it just sat there, quiet. My phone starts buzzing. Text from Leah, one of our port supervisors. New guy already cutting corners. Dock team says safety protocols are being reevaluated. You okay? Reevaluated. Corporate speak for we're gonna ignore expensive safety stuff until someone gets hurt, then act surprised. I'd spent 3 years developing those protocols after a longshoreman nearly lost his leg when a container shifted during a storm. Every procedure was written in someone's blood, metaphorically speaking. Another text came in from Samuel, our lead crane operator. Murray says daily equipment checks are redundant. Wants us to move to weekly inspections. This guy's gonna get someone killed. Samuel had been running cranes for 20 years. If he said something was dangerous, you listened. These weren't pencil-pushing concerns. Crane failures don't just cost money, they cost lives. The daily checks caught everything from hydraulic fluid leaks to worn cable strands, small problems that became catastrophic if ignored. More texts kept coming throughout the morning. Danny from the night shift reported that Murray had eliminated the security guard position, leaving the entire terminal unattended between midnight and 5 a.m. Sarah in dispatch mentioned that the new efficiency protocols eliminated buffer time between vessel arrivals, meaning any delay would cascade through the entire schedule. Dad shows up with pastries. He'd probably been awake since 4 a.m., worrying about what Kyle had done, but too proud to call and apologize directly. We sat there eating in silence, watching the water. A Coast Guard cutter was doing patrol runs near the shipping lanes, probably routine, but it reminded me that we operated in a heavily regulated industry where mistakes had consequences beyond just profit margins. You could have stopped it, I finally said. I didn't vote for it, he replied. But you didn't stop it either. I stepped back too far, he admitted after a long pause. Takes him forever to admit when he's wrong, but he eventually gets there. That's when I dropped the first hint about what was coming. The leases on Docklands 4 and 5 expire in 78 days. Dad's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. They've been on rolling renewals for 10 years. Yeah, well, I bought that land 5 years ago, personally, through a shell company called Pacific Holdings LLC. Market rates have gone up 22% since then. You could practically hear the gears turning in his head. He's no dummy. Spent 40 years in this business. He knew exactly what this meant. Those 2 dock facilities handled about 60% of our container volume. Without them, Tideway would have to either pay through the nose or find alternative facilities that frankly didn't exist in our operational area. See, here's what Kyle didn't know. 5 years ago, when the original dock owner wanted to sell, the company couldn't afford to buy the land outright. We were cash poor after expanding our fleet and upgrading our container handling equipment. So I bought it myself as an investment, then leased it back to Tideway at cost. No markup, no profit, just helping keep the family business stable. That'll cripple them. Then they shouldn't have fired their only structural support. The math was pretty simple. At legacy rates, we were paying $180,000 annually for those dock facilities. At current market rates, it would be closer to $320,000. That difference would eat most of our quarterly profit margin, especially with Kyle's new efficiency measures, likely to create operational problems that cost money to fix. Dad finished his pastry and headed back to his truck. As he was leaving, he turned around. "You're your mother's son." Coming from him, that was basically a compliment and a warning rolled into one. Mom had been the one who actually balanced the books back in the early days. Sweet as pie to your face, but ruthless when it came to protecting what mattered. Things started falling apart faster than I expected. Later that afternoon, Gavin walked onto the dock like he was scouting a movie location. Aviators on, clipboard in hand, no hard hat. Samuel flagged him down. Crane 4's showing hydraulic lag. Needs immediate attention. That's the oldest crane in our lineup. The one you don't ignore unless you want a news headline. Gavin didn't even look up from his tablet. The weekly protocol is fine. If something fails, we'll fix it. Samuel stepped closer. The guy's built like a linebacker and doesn't intimidate easily. If that crane fails, it kills someone. You gonna fix that too? Gavin waved a hand and walked off toward the admin building. The tension was so thick on the dock that 2 junior crew guys stopped working mid-load to avoid being near Crane 4. Within days, the problems were multiplying. The tugboat crews were complaining about rushed turnarounds that didn't allow for proper safety checks. The night shift was understaffed and dangerous. Equipment was being pushed past safe limits. Brett, the fresh out of MBA kid, called me from a blocked number 3 days later. "Mr. Desmond," he said nervously, "I know you're no longer with the company, but is there any way we could talk through the maintenance records?" "Why?" "Well, Mr. Murray says we should digitize everything, but none of the crew knows what the hell half these notes mean, and no one can find the rotation schedule for crane calibration." "Did Gavin cut the paper logs?" "Yes." "Then he can figure it out." Click. The next day, Kyle sends me this hilarious email. Subject line, Tideway Continuity Inquiry. Dude's trying so hard to sound professional it hurts. Chase, in the interest of maintaining continuity during the leadership transition, I'd appreciate it if you could forward your operational files and notes. The board and our new consultant would benefit greatly from your insight. The formal tone was laughable. This was the same guy who used to text me, "Yo bro, where do we keep the crane manuals?" when he couldn't figure out basic operational questions. I stared at that email for about 10 seconds, then closed it. No response needed. My operational files weren't just spreadsheets and schedules. They included years of relationship management with everyone from tugboat captains to customs officials. Like knowing that Captain Rodriguez from Pacific Towing preferred to receive vessel assignments via radio rather than digital dispatch, or that the night shift customs inspector had a thing about proper paperwork sequencing that could delay clearance by hours if you got it wrong. The next day, my lawyer forwards me a follow-up from Tideway's legal team. Same request, more fancy language. They wanted my personal notebooks, 5 years worth of handwritten notes about contract details, supplier quirks, repair schedules, crew management tricks, safety protocols, and all the little institutional knowledge that keeps a place like this running. Thing is, none of that stuff was on company servers. I'm old school. I keep physical notebooks because I don't trust cloud storage and computers crash. Every meeting, every phone call, every random 2 a.m. insight about why the crane in Section C makes that weird noise, all written down in my chicken scratch handwriting. Those notebooks contained goldmine information, like the fact that our parts supplier in Vancouver gives us a 15% discount if we order before the 20th of each month, or that the tugboat captain for the night shift prefers to approach Dock 3 from the north because of the current patterns, or which crew members work best together and which ones need to be scheduled on different shifts. My lawyer was pretty clear. You don't owe them anything. Let them file a discovery motion if they want them that badly. That's when the rumors started flowing in through Leah and my other contacts still working there. Gavin had cut the night shift at Northport Terminal from 6 workers to 4. 2 experienced crew members quit rather than work with skeleton staffing that made the job dangerous. He skipped mandatory dry dock maintenance on 3 vessels and sent them out anyway. The captain of the Seabird was apparently so pissed he filed a formal complaint with the Coast Guard. Kyle tried to smooth it over by calling Captain Williams directly. "Let's be reasonable," Kyle reportedly said. "We can't afford delays over routine checks." Williams shut him down. "You're playing CEO with a fleet that's not built for shortcuts. My crew doesn't move until we're green across the board." Kyle hung up mid-call. Williams filed another complaint, this time copying every regulatory agency from here to Juneau. Within 48 hours, we got flagged for a compliance audit. The Seabird incident was particularly stupid. The vessel needed routine hull inspection and propeller shaft maintenance, standard stuff that takes about 18 hours if you do it right. Murray decided the maintenance window was inefficient and ordered the ship to depart with temporary repairs. Captain Williams refused to sign off on the departure until proper maintenance was completed. Murray went over his head to the harbor master and got the clearance anyway. But the message that really got my attention came from Leah. Insurance rep was asking about dock ownership. Told them I didn't know. They said they'd check public records. Also, that hydraulic leak on Crane 4 is getting worse, but Murray says repairs aren't in the budget. 2 days later, the leak finally let go mid-load. Crane 4 stalled mid-spin with a 12-ton container dangling over Dock 5. Emergency crews had to secure it manually before the wind could swing it into the support beams. The whole operation shut down for 3 hours. Longshoremen refused to work anywhere near the compromised crane. The container was carrying $800,000 worth of electronics that nearly ended up as expensive scrap metal. No one got hurt, miraculously, but it delayed 4 shipments, triggered a union complaint, and nearly earned us a $50,000 fine from port authorities. And guess who magically wasn't available when the Coast Guard showed up asking questions? Yeah, Murray. That's when I knew Kyle was about to step in at big time. The day after the crane incident, he had the nerve to show up in person at Dock 4. Full-on swagger mode. Aviators, clipboard, button-up like he was headed to a golf tournament, not a ticking liability zone. I was on site with Leah, checking on the hydraulic replacement quotes we'd sourced back when the maintenance budget still existed. He strutted over like he owned the pavement under his feet. "Thought you'd moved on," he said with that fake smile. "I did," I replied. "But unlike you, I still give a damn about the people working here." He scoffed. "You're bitter because I'm doing what you never could. Modernizing. Streamlining. Streamlining. You mean ignoring safety checks, slashing shift coverage, and betting no one files a lawsuit before the whole thing collapses?" He leaned in. "Relax, Chase. You played your part. Old guard gets replaced. That's how progress works." I didn't say a word, just stared past him at the leaking hydraulic line he still hadn't authorized repairs for. He followed my gaze, then smirked. Minor hiccups. "Yeah," I said, "until someone dies." See, Tideway's insurance policy was written, assuming the company leased dock space at stable, long-term rates from a neutral third party. The actuarial calculations that determined our premiums were based on operational stability and predictable costs. Except I wasn't neutral anymore, and those rates were about to change dramatically. I called my lawyer that night. "I want to formalize the new lease terms." "Send me your valuation model," she said, without asking why. Game on. A week later, I'm getting a call from Harbor Mutual. That's Tideway's insurance carrier. Risk compliance director named Nate McIntyre. "Mr. Desmond, we had a question come up during a policy review. There was a recent leadership change at Tideway, and we noticed some inconsistencies with their property records." "What kind of inconsistencies?" I asked, though I knew exactly where this was going. "Well, our policy was written under the assumption that these facilities were leased from an independent third party under long-term agreements. But preliminary research suggests the ownership situation may be more complicated. Insurance companies hate complications. Complications mean variables they can't predict, which means risk they can't properly price. We understand you were involved in past lease negotiations. Are you able to confirm who currently owns those properties?" "That would be me," I said, calm as could be. Long silence. "I see. The company's new leadership has been under the impression they still have 10-year guaranteed rights at the current rates. They don't. That clause expired last quarter. I've prepared new lease terms that reflect current market conditions." "And what would those conditions be?" I gave him the numbers. $320,000 annually instead of $180,000, plus standard escalation clauses tied to local commercial real estate indices. But the real kicker was the performance bond requirement. $500,000 held in escrow to guarantee lease payments and cover potential property damage. McIntyre went quiet for a solid 10 seconds. I could practically hear him pulling up actuarial tables and recalculating risk models. In the insurance world, sudden cost increases and cash flow disruption are red flags the size of football fields. You could hear this guy's actuarial brain calculating risk assessments. If Tideway suddenly had to pay market rates for their primary dock facilities, their profit margins would go from tight to underwater real quick. And companies with cash flow problems have a tendency to cut corners on safety and maintenance, which means higher insurance payouts. "I see. And have there been any other operational changes that might affect our risk assessment?" This was my opening. "You might want to look into their new maintenance scheduling protocols. I understand they've moved from daily equipment inspections to weekly." Another pause. In the marine cargo industry, equipment failure isn't just expensive, it's potentially deadly. Insurance companies really hate deadly. "We'll definitely be conducting a comprehensive policy review. Thanks for your time, Mr. Desmond." After he hung up, I sat there thinking about Kyle in his corner office, probably making more PowerPoint slides about operational efficiency, while the foundation of his empire was shifting under his feet. But that wasn't even the best part. My PI buddy Clint had been digging into some stuff for me, and what he found was absolutely beautiful. Kyle hadn't just fired me and brought in his incompetent consultant. He was running a side hustle. Turns out little brother had been filing development permits under a shell company called Oceanic Development. Permits for cargo terminals, rail spurs, and logistics infrastructure that perfectly mirrored the routes and systems I'd spent years building for Tideway. The permits showed a proposed facility in Bellingham that would directly compete with our northern routes. Container storage and rail connections that matched our operational model almost exactly. Even the proposed crane configurations were identical to our setup. Seattle to Anchorage, Coos Bay to Ensenada. The exact same shipping lanes, using the exact same operational strategies. Even the same terminology I'd coined for our seasonal scheduling protocols. Kyle wasn't just trying to push me out. He was planning to gut Tideway, let it fail, then swoop in with his innovative new company that was really just my playbook with his name on it. The permits showed everything. Rail connections that matched our container flow patterns, dock configurations that copied our crane placement, even employee break areas positioned exactly where I'd learned they worked best after years of trial and error. That's when this stopped being about family drama and became about something bigger. This was theft, plain and simple. And if there's one thing I learned from 17 years in logistics, it's that timing is everything. Time to flip the script. I started making some calls. First was Jeremy Talbot, one of Dad's old board members who'd stepped down right after Kyle's takeover. Jeremy's got 30 years in maritime logistics and a nose for BS that could smell Kyle's incompetence from 3 time zones away. Jeremy had been Dad's right-hand man during the expansion years. Solid guy who understood that sustainable growth meant reinvesting in infrastructure and people, not just squeezing margins until something broke. Chase, he said when I called, I've been hearing some disturbing things. Project rumors, lease panic, something about a shell company called Oceanic Development. That would be Kyle, I confirmed. And yes, he's trying to cannibalize Tideway and rebuild it under his own name. I didn't dump everything on Jeremy at once. Just enough to plant the seed, a few screenshots of permits, some quotes from Kyle's investor pitch deck where he'd literally copy-pasted my operational frameworks. Enough to make Jeremy start asking uncomfortable questions to his remaining contacts on the board. Chase, if this is true, the liability implications alone. Jeremy trailed off, probably thinking about shareholder lawsuits and SEC inquiries. It gets worse. He's cutting safety protocols and deferring maintenance to boost short-term numbers. Jeremy knew what that meant. Equipment failures in our industry don't just cost money. They make headlines. But Jeremy wasn't my only play. Next, I took the ferry to Seattle for a lunch meeting with Eliza Grant, VP of Strategic Development at Horizon Maritime. Horizon's one of our main competitors, but Eliza and I have that weird professional respect thing going. We've been trying to poach each other's contracts for years, but always kept it clean. The restaurant overlooked Elliott Bay, and I could see Horizon's main terminal from our window. Their operation was bigger than ours, more automated, but they'd struggled to break into some of our established routes because of the relationships I'd built over the years. I laid out the whole situation over seafood and craft beer, the lease terms, Kyle's betrayal, his shell company scheme, and most importantly, the opportunity. You want us to acquire Tideway's operational assets? She asked. I want you to acquire them before Kyle burns the whole thing down. You get a regional hub with established routes and experienced crews. I get stable lease revenue and the satisfaction of watching my idiot brother learn what happens when you mess with the wrong person. It was just the leadership that was rotten. Our container handling systems were actually more efficient than theirs in some ways, and our crew had experience with specialized cargo that would complement their existing operations. What about regulatory approval? A merger like this would trigger review. Not a merger, an asset acquisition. You buy the operational components, lease the facilities from me, offer employment to existing staff, clean and simple. What about the staff? You keep them. Every single person's worth keeping. These people have been getting jerked around for weeks. Give them stability, and they'll bust their asses for you. Horizon had been looking to expand their Pacific Northwest presence, but building new facilities from scratch would cost $50 to $80 million. Acquiring existing operations with established client relationships would be a fraction of that cost. We shook hands on it. No contracts yet, just an understanding. The formal paperwork would come later, after Kyle finished digging his own grave. Meanwhile, I started reaching out to key Tideway employees. Hey Leah, you might get a call from Horizon Maritime in the next few weeks. They're expanding operations in the Pacific Northwest, looking for experienced supervisors. Manny, keep your resume updated. Word is there might be some opportunities opening up with better management and actual maintenance budgets. Rick, Remember that safety protocol system we talked about implementing? Horizon might be interested in that kind of forward thinking. I wasn't technically recruiting, just making sure good people knew they had options when everything went sideways. And it was about to go very sideways. Within 2 weeks, I had preliminary agreements with Horizon, insurance companies asking uncomfortable questions, and board members starting to sweat about liability issues. Kyle thought he was playing 4D chess, but he'd actually just handed me all the pieces. Kyle called an emergency board meeting on a Monday morning. Same conference room where Dad used to run things with coffee and handwritten notes, now all sleek steel and corporate minimalism. The agenda read, Urgent financial considerations regarding shipyard properties. Translation: Kyle was about to propose selling the terminals to cover his mounting problems. I'd heard through my sources that Harbor Mutual had sent a formal risk assessment notice, basically telling Tideway that their insurance premiums were about to triple unless they could demonstrate operational stability. On top of that, the lease renewal crisis was forcing Kyle to consider desperate measures. I showed up 5 minutes early, walked right in with my legal folder like I owned the place, which technically I kind of did. Kyle's face went white when he saw me. Chase, this is a closed meeting. Not anymore, I said, dropping my folder on the conference table. Everyone here needs to see what's inside. Gavin, the consultant, was sitting there looking like a stock photo of concerned executive number 3. The board was a mix of Kyle's new appointments and Dad's old guard, including Jeremy, who gave me the slightest nod. The room had that tense energy you get when everyone knows something's wrong, but nobody wants to be the first to say it. I opened the folder. Inside, you'll find development permits filed by Oceanic Development, a shell company registered under Kyle's name. These documents show plans for a competing shipping network using Tideway's infrastructure, trade routes, and client relationships. Papers rustled. Someone muttered, Jesus Christ! Page 4 includes screenshots from Kyle's investor presentations. Notice the operational frameworks lifted directly from Tideway manuals. The staggered rotation model? Mine. The emergency dock escalation protocols? Also mine. The so-called innovative redundancy logic? That's the safety system I developed after the Tyree Crane incident in 2018. Board member Davis, one of the old guard, was flipping through pages with increasing alarm. Kyle, what is this? Kyle stood up. This is ridiculous. Chase is clearly... Sit down, Kyle. He didn't, so I kept going. Last month, I received inquiries from Harbor Mutual, Tideway's insurance underwriter. They were surprised to learn the company doesn't actually own the land beneath Docklands 4 and 5. I do. Those leases expired, and I've filed updated terms at full market value. Board member Riley, one of Kyle's people, flipped to the rate sheet. These numbers would destroy our quarterly projections. Correct. And I'd advise against relying on Kyle's backup plan to sell the terminals to Oceanic and pretend it was strategic repositioning. The room was getting uncomfortable. You could see the newer board members starting to realize they'd been played, while the old guard was getting pissed about being kept in the dark. That's when I dropped the second folder. Horizon Maritime, our longtime competitor, has submitted a formal acquisition offer for Tideway's operational assets. They'll lease the facilities from me at sustainable rates and retain current staff under competent leadership. AK, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about preserving something that worked. Tideway employed 147 people directly and probably supported another 300 jobs indirectly through suppliers and contractors. Kyle's schemes would have destroyed all of that for his personal gain. The room went dead quiet. Then Dad spoke up from the corner where he'd been watching this whole thing unfold. Kyle, he said quietly, is this true? Kyle looked around the table, searching for an ally. Gavin was studying his phone, like it held the secrets of the universe. I was protecting the company, Kyle finally said. His voice had lost that cocky edge. Chase was holding us back. I had a vision that involved stealing from your brother and betraying the people who built this place. Dad stood up, and for a moment he looked like the old man who'd built this company from nothing. You were supposed to carry this forward, not burn it down for spare parts. Dad's voice cracked a little on that last part. The vote took 6 minutes. Kyle was removed as CEO. Gavin's contract was terminated pending legal review. The board moved to accept Horizon's acquisition offer. Kyle, you didn't just fire me, I said, standing. You fired the guy holding the roof up while you lit the walls on fire. No yelling, no drama, just votes and parliamentary procedure and the sound of power changing hands. Kyle walked out without saying another word, shoulders hunched like he couldn't believe what just happened. After everyone else left, Dad and I sat in that conference room watching freighters move across the bay through the big windows. I should have seen it coming, he said. You did see it. You just didn't want to admit it. You'll do good with Horizon. I'll do better than that. I'll make sure people keep their jobs and the terminals run right. He looked at me for a long moment. You always were the smart one. Took you long enough to say it. Fast forward 12 months. I'm standing at the edge of Dock 5, hands in my coat pockets, watching the morning shift get to work. The Horizon Maritime logo hangs above the old Tideway gates now. Sleeker font, brighter colors, but the bones are the same. Cranes moving cargo, freighters coming and going, the whole organized chaos of a working port. Container throughput is up 23% from last year. Safety incidents are down to 0, and employee satisfaction scores are through the roof. And I'm right where I belong. Not in some corner office, but down here with the people who actually make things happen. My business card says Regional Director of Logistics now. Not CEO, not some fancy title with no real meaning. Just the person who makes sure everything works the way it's supposed to. The Horizon integration went smoother than anyone expected. They kept their promise about retaining staff, actually increased wages across the board, and invested in equipment upgrades that we'd been putting off for years. The new container tracking system alone saves us about 4 hours per day in administrative overhead. Plus, they brought in real safety consultants, not corner-cutting consultants. Our OSHA compliance score went from concerning to exemplary within 6 months. Insurance premiums dropped by 18% because we actually looked like a professional operation again. The tracking system was a game changer. Real-time GPS monitoring of every container from arrival to departure, automated notifications for clients, digital manifests that eliminated most of the paperwork bottlenecks that used to slow everything down. The installation took 3 weeks and cost about $280,000, but it paid for itself in efficiency gains within 6 months. I still do morning rounds with the crew, still double-check safety logs with Leah, who got promoted to operations supervisor, still slip Manny a cinnamon roll every Friday, because the guy works his ass off keeping our equipment running like a Swiss watch. The best part? Crane 4's hydraulic system got completely rebuilt. No more leaks, no more grinding noises, no more wondering if today's the day it catastrophically fails and kills someone. Kyle's big venture? Oceanic Development folded by October. Once word got out about his double dealing, investors ran for the hills. Permits got revoked. His shiny presentations became cautionary tales in maritime business schools. But here's the final nail in the coffin. One of his potential investors did due diligence and discovered that most of his proprietary systems were actually stolen from his previous employer. Legal discovery in the intellectual property lawsuit revealed emails where Kyle discussed copying Tideway operations piece by piece. The investor was from Portland, a guy named Wang who'd made his money in tech logistics and was looking to diversify into traditional shipping. Wang's due diligence team was thorough, to put it mildly. They didn't just verify Kyle's business plan, they cross-referenced every operational detail against public records, talked to former employees, even ran credit checks on key personnel. When they found the stolen intellectual property, they didn't just walk away. They reported it to the relevant authorities. Last I heard, he was trying to rebrand himself as a logistics consultant. Good luck selling expertise when everyone in the industry knows you're the guy who nearly destroyed a profitable family business through incompetence and greed. The maritime industry's smaller than people think. Word travels fast when someone screws up this spectacularly. Kyle's name became shorthand for what not to do in logistics circles. Even saw his disaster case study in a Harvard Business Review article about family business succession failures. Dad and I talk regularly now. Not about the past, we're both too stubborn to rehash ancient history, but about freight trends and how Horizon repainted the maintenance hangars without using those awful corporate colors that make everything look like a doctor's office. More importantly, I stayed connected with Kyle's kids. They didn't ask to be part of this mess, and family drama shouldn't punish innocent people. Brought them down to the docks last Christmas to show them the control tower. Can you really see all the ships from here? My nephew Alex whispered. All the ones that matter, I told him. Standing here now, watching a container ship ease into port with deck crew bustling around like ants with a purpose, I feel something I haven't in years. Peace. This isn't about a title. Never was. I don't need my name on a building or a photo in the boardroom. I've got my crew, my docks, and my system running smooth. Safety protocols back in place. Real upgrades happening, wages up, morale high. Tommy still brings cookies on Fridays. Leah runs the ops floor like a machine. Manny's got a full crew, real parts, real budget. Rick doesn't have to sleep in the break room anymore. Kyle thought he could fire me and delete 2 decades of work. Instead, he deleted himself from an industry that doesn't forget. And I'm still here, boots on concrete, clipboard in hand, making sure the tide keeps moving.